I was furious when she burst through the door 3 hours late. "Where the hell have you been? I had to get Chad ready and take him to school. Bobby is pissed and I have to get to work." She simply shrugged. "Bill wanted us to work a couple of hours. He even paid us cash so Uncle Sam wouldn't get his greedy paws on him. It'll make up for the time you missed, and Bob already said you were the best he ever had. He will survive." "Did the phones stop working? You could have at least warned me." "Sorry, I didn't think of that. I have to go to bed and you have to go to work. I'll cook us a nice dinner to make up for it." She didn't give me a chance to answer before she headed to the bedroom. I thought about following her, but I knew it would lead to one hell of a fight, and I really had to go to work. I was halfway to my place of work when it dawned on me. She smirked slightly as she said she was done. Something was wrong, and had been for a long time. I put her out of my mind. Working with saws and nail pullers requires concentration. It was 1983, and we were in the middle of a mild recession. I got laid off, and my unemployment check wasn't very big. Then Gail was fired, and that really hit us. Things were going hard, very hard. We looked, but everyone else was in the same boat, and there just weren't any jobs, especially for her. She dropped out of school in 10th grade and was offered little. Her last job was minimum wage, but that was all she could get, and we needed money to survive. Then I got lucky. I received a call from a friend whom I had not seen for several years. Bobby and I worked in construction together in the late 70s. He always said we were a good team, and he was sorry to see me go. But I had a good opportunity, and I couldn't pass it up. He stayed in construction and eventually opened his own small business, primarily renovating and maintaining real estate, although he occasionally built houses. While everyone else was struggling, he was doing well thanks to service contracts. His largest client owned most of the rental properties in one county and a few more in another, and he never stopped working. "Mac, dude, Jack said you got fired. I just lost a couple of guys and I was thinking about you. Would you like to help me out part-time?" Damn right. He gave me directions to his next project and told me to be there at 7. After we hugged, he asked me if I remembered how to hang siding. "Oh, I guess I can do that." He grinned, gave me 2 assistants, and let me go. The rest of the guys weren't particularly motivated, which I thought was odd in the busy time we were living in cramped quarters, but I didn't distract them from their work, and we finished in 2 days. He commissioned me to replace windows in a couple of rental apartments. By the end of the week, I had 35 hours of work. He held out the receipts, and I was shocked when I looked. This was half of what I was owed. He just grinned and told me to meet him at the bar, a small establishment where mostly construction workers worked. I walked in, he bought me a beer and handed me a pool cue. "We're gonna play a game of pool. I'm gonna lose. When I lose, I'll pay you the bet we made." Oddly enough, this is exactly what it would be if I paid you for all the hours you worked. He chuckled when he saw the expression on my face. "Hey, you told me you could make $60 and still get a full unemployment check." I nodded, and he continued. "Well, the amount I paid you is a little less than what you could have earned, so you'll get a full check and some money they don't know about. We won't always use this amount. From time to time, it will exceed it, and in most cases, it will be less. I figure I'll pay you a full check about every 6 weeks. You'll lose the check that week, but the government will be happy. Of course, you can act like a good citizen and report everything at your discretion." I thought about this while drinking beer. I've been to the unemployment office twice. Both times I was treated like a number and felt like a minimalist. And although I know they were overworked, the staff were downright rude, not just to me, but to everyone. "Fuck them. You need to practice. Your pool game sucks." He just grinned. I was going to share the good news with Gail, but when I got home, she was already on edge. "Where the hell have you been? Do I smell beer? We don't have money for you to drink." It took me several deep breaths before I could answer. I went to the bar where Bobby hangs out to get my money. I had 1 beer and he paid for it. Now we have a little break on the bills. I have a little extra, I was going to say cash, but she spoke to me, telling me that a few hours here and there wouldn't help, and I needed to get a real job. "You know no one wants to hire a high school graduate. Then you should take advantage of the program they offered you and get your GED. It will help, if not now, then in the future. You always complain about being stuck in the house. You could go out in the evenings, but I'd like to keep an eye on Chad. Think about it. For some reason, she resisted, so she turned around and left. I went outside and started playing with our son. He was in first grade, and the world was a novelty to him. He told me about what he had learned that day, and I couldn't help but smile. He was a good child, and even if I had to make sacrifices, I made sure he had good clothes and shoes for school, and money when he needed it for special things like a field trip to the aviary. By the time we finished playing, Gail had already prepared the food. We ate some mac and cheese and hot dogs, but we weren't hungry. I never got around to telling Gail about the money under the table. I just took them and paid the electric bill. One day, a few weeks later, I came home and she kissed me deeply. This surprised me because she had been a little stingy with kisses lately. Guess what? I found a job. She had prepared a very tasty dinner and was wearing short shorts and a loosely tied halter top. One of her playful outfits. I smiled, thinking that life was getting better. "That's wonderful, honey. What is it?" "Let's eat first. Get Chad settled for the night, and I'll tell you everything." This made me frown slightly. "What's so mysterious about work?" We had pork chops, something we haven't had much of this year. It was delicious. The cake was even better. And after Chad took a bath and talked about himself, she pulled out a couple of my favorite beers. I stopped buying them a few months ago because they were a little pricey. I was starting to feel very uncomfortable. She filled the mugs and sat down opposite my chair. "Honey, do you remember Alice?" Yes, I remembered Alice. She was one of her friends when we were dating and, to be honest, a bit slutty. I'm not a prude. What a woman does with her life is usually none of my business. However, Alice seemed to have no boundaries. She was frank to the point of impossibility, and did not hesitate to propose to husbands in front of their wives, if she had several. She tried to propose to me twice, and Gail thought it was funny. She tried again when Gail wasn't there. I pretended to be interested and let her lead us to a quiet place. She leaned down to kiss me, but then my hand closed around her neck, and she was pressed against the wall. "Listen carefully. You snuggle up to me one more time and I'll ruin your world. You won't look as sexy with a broken nose, and that could definitely happen. I'll act remorseful and swear it was an accident, but every time after this, if you decide to hit on a man in a relationship, you will remember your crooked nose and think twice. Is everything clear?" She sobbed heavily and nodded her head in agreement. That was the last time I saw her or heard anything about her until now. The feeling of anxiety grew in huge leaps. As far as I remember, she was directly involved in 7 divorce cases, mostly as the second woman. I simply nodded. "Well, I ran into her at the store the other day when we met, and she found out I wasn't working. She offered me a job." "What kind of work? Does it involve a horizontal position?" Gail burst into a red flame. "No, asshole, that's not true. For your information, she's married now and works for her cousin. He owns a motel in Charlotte, and she works the night shift, 9 to 6. He always makes his night shift clerks work as a couple, and the woman she works with quit." "Why did she quit?" "How should I know? The thing is, she quit. And the pay there is good, $10 an hour. For someone used to making $6.65 an hour, that seemed like real money. I tried to be diplomatic. "It's not a bad salary, Gail, but honestly, I don't feel comfortable. Is the motel in a good part of town? Can you sleep there, or is it a dump? I wouldn't want to get hurt or killed for $10 an hour. And honestly, I'm not thrilled about you working with Alice. She's changed. A lot. She has a husband and a 2-year-old girl. Alice is not the same woman we both remembered. Plus, there are cops patrolling there often, and we're completely safe. I promise I'll get a bad feeling the first time I see her. And I'll leave." We talked a little more about Chad and how this would affect him. "I leave at 6. I can be home by 6:45, make you breakfast, take him to school, and then come home and sleep. That way I can spend the evening with my 2 favorite men before they go to bed. And I have to go to work." We talked and agreed to discuss this later. Gail talked me into inviting Alice and her family over for dinner. I have to admit that she looked completely different from what I remembered. Her hair was pulled back, She was wearing a conservative top and pants, and she was pleasant. Her husband seemed like a nice guy. I wondered if he knew about her past. Her little girl was adorable, and Chad immediately fell in love with her. While I was preparing the grill, he happened to be in the backyard and let her wander around the area, keeping up with her every step of the way. Gail and Alice laughed. If he's as enamored when they grow up, we can be mothers-in-law. The evening turned out to be pleasant. After eating, the little girl lay down to take a nap, and Chad fell asleep on the floor. Her husband, Jeff, went to the bathroom, and Gail went to the kitchen to get a beer. I took advantage of this opportunity. Honey, remember that little conversation we had before Gail and I got married? Her eyes widened, and she rubbed her neck in embarrassment. It was a long time ago. I have changed. I have to admit, I like the new Alice much better than the old one, but I want you to remember something. If anything happens to Gail, anything bad, and I think you had something to do with it, I will keep my promise. Remember that. Jeff returned, and Gail came out with a beer. They stayed here for about another hour before they left. Before their tail lights were out of sight, she began asking questions. Do you see how much she has changed? It's hard to believe. I never thought she would be married with a child. I always thought that if she got pregnant then, half the men in the area would be sweating. She hit me in the ribs. That was mean of you. Maybe, but that would still be pretty accurate. Go ahead, clean yourself up and go to bed. I thought about everything the next morning while I was mowing the grass. Alice, despite all her past flaws, was an attractive woman. I smiled when I saw her and Gail together. Gail was willow-like, except for her breasts. Men flocked to this chest like flies to honey, but Gail brushed off most of them. She told me right away that she wasn't a virgin, but I wasn't a virgin either, and that didn't matter to me when we said our vows. In the end, I didn't fight her when she got the job, but he still made her make a bunch of promises and was still worried about her. I was awake when she came home after her first day of work. How did everything go? It's boring as hell. There's not much going on at the motel late at night. Everyone's asleep except for a few partygoers who come after the bars close, but they don't usually make noise. It's easy money, honey. She returned home with her first check and couldn't be happier. We decided that we would use her income for the first months to pay bills and then start saving most of it to find a house. I worked more and more with Bobby and found that I enjoyed it more than I remembered. Bobby begged me to go full-time if I didn't find anything by the time my unemployment benefits ran out. We were still playing with the system. Part of the salary was received according to reports, the rest was under the table. I started putting half of the money into a savings account, planning to use it for Gail and Chad's vacation. This would be our first vacation in 4 years, and Chad had never seen the ocean, so I wanted to take him to the beach. Everything went well for about 4 months. One day, Gail came and said that the maid from the third shift had quit, and she and Alice were going to earn extra money by cleaning empty rooms. One will work at the desk, and the other will clean, and they will alternate days. Does this mean you will sit at the table alone? Honey, no one, and I mean no one, comes to the front desk after midnight. Plus, we have walkie-talkies that we carry with us, so if someone comes to the front desk that we don't like, let's call each other. Everything will be okay. The extra money came in handy. One day, Gail came in looking beaten. I asked, and she shrugged. Rough night? The convention guys came over and they left the rooms a mess. I spent the night cleaning the rooms. Could you make Chad breakfast today? I knew what a bad day was like, so I helped Chad get ready for school while she showered and went to bed. She was depressed for a few days, but then seemed to perk up. As the weeks passed, she seemed to change. At first, it was little things. She stopped talking about her work, only saying that it was all the same, all the same. She also began to dress better. I complimented her, and she seemed happy. I felt guilty spending money, but I needed clothes. I took some of the extra money I was making and updated them. There's that smirk again that I've been seeing lately, as if she knows some joke that I don't know. This was starting to bother me. Then the changes began in the bedroom. We usually made love 3 times a week, if our schedules allowed. This mostly happened on weekends. But she developed a habit of pouncing on me right after Chad went to bed, 2 or 3 times a week, especially on Thursdays. She was a little more aggressive than before. I finally asked her about this change. She looked stunned and took a minute to respond. I've never mentioned this to you, but there's a lot to see in a motel. There are a few couples who come every 2 weeks or so who like to leave the doors open or venture into the pool. Plus, they tend to don't date the same man every week. I think they're in an open relationship. Some of the things Alice and I see are pretty wild. That's what makes me like this. I had to think for a minute. Isn't that dangerous for a motel? What about cops, irritated spouses, and the like? It's late at night, and no one is there. If we see regular guests, Alice warns them, and they take him into the house and close the doors. They tip well, dear, usually 20 in each room. They're responsible for most of my new wardrobe. I was starting to dislike the idea of her continuing to work at the motel. Then the insolence began, minimizing our family time. I asked her what was the matter. I'm just tired of struggling. It seems like every cent we get takes away something. Wouldn't it be nice to do what we like when we want, like we used to do before we had bills and a baby? Everyone has fantasies. Yes, I would love to. But the reality is that we have bills and a baby. Do you want to drop everything? Drop Chad somewhere and run away? I don't think so. Things are getting better, honey. Our bills, they're paid, and we're even saving a little. I'm thinking about going full-time with Bobby. He'll give me a raise and more hours if I agree. It hurt me when she dismissed the idea. Do you think this will make a difference? You need a job with insurance. We're all healthy now, but one accident will ruin us for years. I sighed. It is what it is, Gail. Unless we find a new profession that pays much better, we'll have to work with what we have. There's that little smirk again. One day, I needed a pen. Chad loved to carry anything he could write with into his room. He was an aspiring artist, and his work covered every inch of our refrigerator. He was sleeping, and I didn't want to wake him, so I decided to take one of the pens from Gail's purse. I didn't go into her purse because she filled it with stuff, and it annoyed me. I took the bag and grinned at its weight. I opened it and just sat there for a minute. It was full of money, so much money. I pulled them out and counted them. $2,300, mere pennies for that time. I heard Gail wake up, so I put the money back and put her purse on the floor next to the couch. I sat and thought while she chatted. This money could not possibly be legal. I decided not to say anything. On Friday evening, I would go to work to pick her up. Honey, Chad will be with your parents on Friday. Bobby and I are going fishing. He found a spot on the lake and swears every catfish he pulls weighs over 10 pounds. She smiled. Go ahead. Have a good time. And I'm looking forward to salt and pepper catfish for dinner on Sunday. Catch a big one for me. She wanted to play and seemed disappointed when I waved her off. I pulled something at work today. I think I need an ice pack or a heating pad for my back. Gail immediately became concerned and brought me pain pills, an ice pack, and hooked up a heating pad next to my chair. She kissed me as she left. Rest, honey. Don't go to work tomorrow. We can afford to take the day off. I'll check on you when I get home. She called me later, which she rarely did, to check on how I was doing. I told her I was feeling much better and wasn't going to do anything but draw tomorrow, so work would be fine. She grumbled a little, told me to take the day off, told me she loved me, and hung up. The next day, I was very ineffective at work. Finally, Bobby told us to go to lunch. Come on, Mac, I'm buying. We sat down at a small diner he preferred, and after we ordered, he told me to tell him everything that was bothering me, or he would send me home. I really needed someone to talk to, so I told him about the money and her general attitude. What are you going to do about it? I'll go to the motel tomorrow night and see what's going on there. What if you see something you don't like? Remember Jefferson George? Of course I remembered. He was the richest kid in school. His father had more money than half the city combined. I found him with a 14-year-old girl whom he gave some alcohol to and tried to drag her into his car. She was very drunk, but resisted as best she could. He didn't know there was anyone else nearby, so I tapped him on the shoulder. He looked around, told me to fuck off, and started getting into the car. The girl was my cousin. I beat him to a pulp. His father practically owned the police department, and someone called 911. I often thought I was luckier than anyone, and that was never true, because a state trooper stopped the car within sight and just finished issuing a fine when a call was received. He looked at the girl in Jefferson and called an ambulance. Then he took statements from all the witnesses, and they were afraid to lie to him because he was not local. Local police showed up and wanted to take matters into their own hands, but the C student stopped them. Sorry, guys. I've already started the paperwork, so he's mine. I'll take him to the station for questioning when I'm done, and you can do your own investigation. They didn't like it very much, but they had no choice. He asked around, found out who my friends were, and told Bobby to find a phone and call my family. Tell them to get to the station as quickly as possible. They might want to call a lawyer. He took his time, but in the end, he was forced to put me in his car. There was no love lost between the state and the locals. I later learned that they were investigating the police department for corruption and abuse of power. He talked to me while he was driving. Listen, boy, there are things going on here that you don't know about. I'll drop you off at the station. Don't tell anyone. Is everything clean here? Okay, your parents will hopefully be there before us, but just in case, refuse the interview until they arrive. We arrived there before my parents, so the policeman was in no hurry to let me go to the local residence. He took out his Instamatic camera and took several pictures. The policeman who was waiting for me asked him why. Because there are no bruises or contusions on the boy. If they appear later, I will be forced to investigate. Do you understand what I'm saying? The policeman didn't like it, but he couldn't say anything. My parents and Uncle Pete walked through the door. The policeman asked to show my documents and let me go to them. I will not press charges until the investigation is complete. My advice is to keep the child close to home for a few days. We were about to walk out the door when 2 policemen stopped us. Not so fast. We're taking him into custody. You can post bail for him on Monday. What is he accused of? The state began an investigation and released him to his parents. In my opinion, the state is more important than the city, if I remember the law correctly. Since I am a lawyer, I am sure that is true. They changed tactics. He's not under arrest. We just want to question him. For 2 days? It won't work. I will invite him for interrogation on Monday morning. I will be present during his interrogation. All questions will go through me. Is that clear? I have orders. Then find me the person who gave the order. If you can't do it within a reasonable time, we'll go home. There were a lot of whispers and phone calls, but within an hour, we were home. The father wrote out a check and handed it to his brother-in-law. Here, this is the fee. He laughed and tore it apart. Write me one for $5. I'm tired of losing cases to corrupt cops. Maybe this case will change things. When the smoke cleared, no one had been charged. Mr. Moneybags gave up after reading reports of alcohol levels in his son's system, his girlfriends, and what witnesses said. Jefferson was not well liked, and many witnesses said he threw the first blow. He took revenge. We were both expelled, and our son was sent to a boarding school to finish his studies. I couldn't walk across the stage and had to go to summer school to get my diploma. Bobby brought me back to the present, and I nodded. Then remember what it took you to ruin it. I know you. There is no planning for you. You just rush in, cursing everything around you. You need to stop and think when you find out what's going on. Don't do anything stupid. Remember, Chad? You have to make sure nothing happens to him. He was damn right. You're right, but I have to do something. We'll go to this motel tomorrow and check it out. If we see something wrong, we'll think it over before we react. Tell me what you understand. This was the best plan, and I agreed. At 11 o'clock on Friday night, we parked in the empty lot across from the motel. It was the first time I saw him. It wasn't a dump, but it wasn't the best option either. I was surprised how full the parking lot was. We had binoculars and I could see Alice behind the counter, but Gail was nowhere to be seen. At 11:30, a woman who looked a lot like Gail left the motel and walked across the parking lot to the club. I was halfway out of the car when Bobby pulled me back. Sit still. She hasn't seen me more than a few times, so I'm going to put this cap on and go see what's going on. Don't get out of the car. 90 minutes later, he returned, looking a little pale and damn uncomfortable. He sat for a minute before speaking. She dances, Mac. Her stage name is Desiree, and she's pretty good at it. I saw her do the dance, and then she came out and took 3 guys into the back room. The bouncer told me that's all they allow inside, but the women had an agreement with the motel, and as long as they didn't leave the company premises, they didn't say anything. I asked Desiree, and he laughed. She's booked today, and she doesn't work on weekends. I think she has a child that she is seeing at this time. Next week it works on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the following week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. She and a girl named Alice take turns. I think she works at the motel on the nights she doesn't work here. Do you want me to arrange for you? I handed him $50. I'd like to on Wednesday, but I don't know if I can come. If I'm not here by midnight, I won't come. She's pretty expensive, man. I handed him another $50. Here, if I don't show up on time, it'll be free money for her. While we were talking, Gail left the club with a man on her arm and headed straight to the motel, waving to Alice as she walked by. By 3 o'clock, she had made 2 more trips. I froze as Bobby started his truck. We've seen enough. You need to calm down and think about what you want to do. Let's go fishing. What? We were supposed to fish, remember. Besides, what could be better than making plans on a deserted lakey in the middle of the night? So we went fishing. We even caught a few, but mostly we talked. What are you going to do? I'll divorce her. I don't see any other option. I need to keep Chad. I don't want him to find out what she's doing. Okay, we need to gather evidence and catch her in the act, so to speak. Any ideas? I have to say, I think the local cops are in on this. We saw them drive through the parking lot 3 times, remember? They need to know what's going on. That's when I remembered the C student. He was instrumental in eliminating the local cops, and because of this, he was promoted to SBI. Now he was mainly involved in corruption cases. From time to time, I saw it in the newspapers. I think I know someone who can help. I managed to hold out all weekend. I even had sex with her once, all the time pretending that I was in pain. She made herself comfortable and paid Chad a little more attention than usual. He ate it. He had really missed his mother lately. This made what I was about to do even more difficult. I called first thing Monday, explained who I was, and told him I had information I thought he needed. They connected me in about 20 minutes. He remembered me, and we talked about the past for a few minutes, after which he asked how he could help me. I told him the whole story, including the fact that one of the women was my wife, and that we thought the local police were involved. He listened and took notes. Can you meet me and my partner there tonight? I had to take Chad to his relatives, telling them it was urgent. We met at the Waffle Iron and started talking. He introduced his partner, an attractive red-haired girl, and offered to go undercover in their car. I thought it was going to be a bulky 4-door with undercover cop written all over it, but it was actually a great 3-year-old T-Bird. They grinned when they saw my face. We confiscated it during a bad guy bust a couple of years ago. That's how we get most of our undercover cars. We change every month. Firebird will be next. Lieutenant Brown, whom I knew, laughed. Yes, and when we do, I'll be driving. Detective Walters has his foot in front. While we were taking position, they joked with each other in a good-natured way. I highlighted Gail and Alice. They watched as Alice entered the club. Brown came out first. I'll go there and see how much I can find out, then Tubby will come. We talked while we waited. Wouldn't it be awkward to go into a place like this? She laughed. I did this kind of dancing for 3 years while I was in college, but that's all I did. I've never even done a lap dance. I've seen too many relationships fail while I was working to ever give in to temptation. I show up, try to interview with the manager, tell him I'm moving to the area in a few weeks and try to find a job. I have a few pictures left over from that job to satisfy any questions he might have. She had just finished telling me about her lawyer husband and 2 daughters. Seeing my face, she smiled. My husband knows. We met at a club. He worked in law school as a bartender and bouncer. He knows that I never dated guys, and I know that he never touched any of the working girls, although they saw. We decided to go on a few dates to prove it and never looked back. It's been 7 years and we're still as happy as ever. Like on our wedding day. She looked at me sadly. Don't judge your wife just yet. She may have been forced into this. I've seen it happen. If so, I strongly recommend that you see a psychologist and try to save your marriage. If she is doing this of her own free will, well, how it all ends depends only on you. Brown returned, and there was no smile on his face. I have the same information as your friend. There are about half a dozen girls involved in this case. It looks like it's quite a large ring. There's a picture of your wife hanging on the wall with the other women. If there's a red X at the bottom with a circle around it, that means she's available for extras. Tubby, you're free. She was gone for about 30 minutes. When she got back into the car, she didn't look very happy. This place is located just above the brothel. I met with the manager, showed him my old photos, and told him that I was moving and would be free in 5 weeks. This scoundrel admitted that many of his girls were hooked, but he turned a blind eye to it. He also hinted at testing in bed. I just grinned and said, "We'll do it as soon as I find a job. Right now I really need a shower." They took me back to the diner. That's where your involvement ends. I'm so sorry, boy. It was obvious that you loved her. What is next? We'll put together a small team. It'll be about a month before we get going. Watch the papers for that. The club, the local cops, and the motel will go down. We'll close the club for solicitation, the motel for running a brothel, and the cops will lose their jobs and I have to tell you that all the women involved in this case will face numerous charges and it will become public knowledge. The only plus is that you have a good reputation and a regular job, and judges do not like to award custody of children to such women, if there is a worthy alternative. You are going to get a divorce, right? I have to. I can't forgive her, and I can't subject a 6-year-old to this lifestyle. Tabby reached out and touched my palm. We usually try to stay out of divorce cases to keep our face out of the news, but if you need us, we're sure your lawyer can arrange an in-room deposition. It dawned on me. Damn! There's no way I can act normal for this long. I'm just not that good at it. What can I do? Brown chuckled. This is going to be a pretty big deal. We don't want it to fall apart too soon. You said you worked in construction? I'll see what I can do now. Try to hang in there for a few days and we'll get back to you. True to our word, 2 days later, we were offered a short-term contract to help build a new prison halfway across the state. Apart from what was going on, they were offering damn good money, and even under normal circumstances, it would have been hard to refuse. Bobby knew what was going on. He knew why we got the contract, but he didn't care. That evening, I told Gail, "Good news. Did you know we're trying to figure out how to make more money?" Bobby received a job offer from an old friend. His project is behind schedule and he faces fines if he doesn't finish on time. We'll make half as much as now. It'll be 7 days a week for a month, but with overtime, it'll be about the same as what I make in 4. I have to do it, honey. It could lead to more opportunities in the future. Surprisingly, she was unhappy and tried to talk me out of it. I made every argument she had ever made to improve our situation, and her excuses for me staying home seemed to have reached a dead end. It's only for a month, honey. I wouldn't want to go that long without loving you, but think about the sex I'll have when I get home. A whole month without it. We won't be able to leave the bed for the first few days. Gail fell silent, knowing that she couldn't do without her. I agreed with her parents and mine to help her, kissed her and Chad deeply and left. I didn't lie about overtime. They were so behind that they were happy to let us work 7 days a week. It was a new minimum security prison, and the cells were built to look more like dormitories. We did siding and roofing. These were the largest buildings I had ever sheathed, and we managed to sheath and roof 2 houses a week. There were only 6 left to do when we arrived, so by the last week, we were looking for something to do. Bobby led the mason crew, and I helped the plumbers. Crawling under these buildings was annoying, but the plumbing contractor paid me extra to lead the crew. After 4.5 weeks, All that had to be done was to fence the area. Without the fence, it didn't look like a prison, and the general contractor told me that was done on purpose to make it less likely for inmates to try to escape. I asked him if it worked. According to reports, the number of escape attempts in such places has decreased by 44%. There are still a lot of stupid people, so they have to put up a fence and keep a guard, but the state is happy with the results. I called home from a payphone twice a week, and we usually talked for about 30 minutes. Chad kept me updated on everything that had happened to him since we last spoke and asked me when I would be coming home. Gail talked about general things and asked when I would be home. I told her that next week was my last, and I would be back home next Tuesday. From time to time, I would ask a question about her work, and she would brush it off. The last time we spoke, she surprised me. "I'm thinking about quitting, honey. I'm tired of not being able to sleep next to you every night. Plus, I feel like we're growing apart. I don't want that, honey. I still love you." This was something new. I called Brown. "I'm glad you called. I was just about to call you. Watch the news Friday night, then it will happen." I was silent for a minute, and he noticed it. "Changed your mind?" "Yes. I loved her for a long time, you know. It's going to be hard on our baby." "Yes, but if we want to guarantee custody, this is the only way to do it. We are not charging her. She has no criminal record. If she finds a favorable judge, you will become a part-time father. Do you really want her to get custody? I will tell you. You'll talk about this later, but everything has changed." On Friday evening, I called to hear her voice one last time. I was thinking, maybe you should stay home today. I'll come home, we'll grab Chad and be on the beach in 3 hours. Think how happy he'll be. Think how happy we'd be. There was a moment of silence before she spoke. "It's too late to relieve anyone, and I don't want Alice to be there alone. I'll come home on Saturday and take a nap while you get everything ready. We can leave by 1 in the afternoon and be at the beach by 5. Let's try to spend a week there. It will be good for us." I sighed. I have tried. "Okay, see you tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. We need to catch up. I have to go. I love you." "I loved you too." I wondered if she understood what I said. That evening, Bobby and I watched the evening news at 11 o'clock. We were in a different market, but this news ended up in the general section. Tonight, the SBI, the Anti-Illegal Activities Task Force, conducted a major raid at the Dreamland Motel in Charlotte, North Carolina, dismantling a large network. 14 people were arrested, including the motel owner and 2 night managers. The owner was charged for providing the space, and the managers appear to have been part of this ring. The manager of the Fantastic Ladies Entertainment Lounge, located next to the motel, was also arrested during the investigation, although his charges were not made public. As the reporter spoke, people could be seen being led out of the motel to a police van. Alice walked first, wearing what appeared to be only a t-shirt. Walking right behind her was Gail, wearing a very short skirt and top that exposed most of her breasts. I think Brown may have had something to do with this because the camera zoomed in on Gail, showing a close-up of her face. She cried. It was clear that none of them were wearing panties when they were loaded into the van. Bobby looked at me. "Sorry, man. I know how much you loved her. You know you had to do it this way for Chad's sake. You know, when everyone tells you that you did the right thing, and you know that you did the right thing, why do you feel like you did the wrong thing? Because usually the right things are always the hardest things. You didn't know when you married Gail or when she went to work at the motel that things would turn out this way. Bad things happen to good people. How they deal with it shows their character. Now, I'll leave you alone. Cry, scream if you want. Just try to get enough out so that you can function when it's time to go home to your baby. I know I shouldn't say this, but I'm here for you, brother." When he left, I tried to cry. I thought about going to the store and buying a bottle. I thought about hitting the walls in my motel room. In the end, I didn't do any of this. I just sat there, numb, for the rest of the night. Bobby found me and, without saying a word, turned on the shower and practically pushed me inside. Hot water hit me, and I cried, bitter tears of betrayal and loss. When I came out, I felt much better. "Let's go. You lead. I slept almost the entire way home. Their bail was set at $2,000 each. She had money in a secret account, but she couldn't access it, and there was no way in hell I was going to pay it. The longer she stayed in jail, the more certain it became that I would get custody of Chad. The guy didn't understand. I tried to explain it to him as best as I could. Son, your mother got involved with bad people and did some bad things. She doesn't want to live with us now, so we're on our own. She still loves you, but she just can't be with us right now. So she'll be coming home later? I don't know, son. We'll see. I did everything I could to try to reassure him that his mother would no longer live with us. I was glad that it was the beginning of summer. I know how cruel kids can be, and I hoped that by the time school started again, the whole thing would be out of everyone's minds. Both grandparents helped look after Chad while I worked. We usually had dinner with those with whom he was staying. It was very awkward with her parents at first. They apologized to Gail, but I blew them off. She made her choice, and it forced me to make mine. I need you to understand that your daughter and I do not have a future together. None. But it was her choice, not yours. Chad loves you, and I will never come between you and your grandson. If it means anything, I always thought well of you. If you feel uncomfortable around me, or if it becomes too hard for you to hold Chad, let me know. Her dad just looked sad, and her mom hugged me and started crying. When she came out, she said that she would wait for Chad in the morning and for me in the afternoon. Meatloaf tomorrow. I hugged her again and shook his hand, wondering as I walked away how they dealt with the stigma of what Gail had done. It was a small town after all. I just hoped there weren't too many little people in there. It took her 10 days to get out of prison. By then, all her belongings were packed into boxes and stored in her parents' garage. Along with the divorce papers, I sent her a letter asking her to stay away from me and that sometime in the future, after the divorce, I would like to ask her why. When she was finally free, she immediately went to her parents' house. I don't know what kind of reception she was expecting, but they made it clear to her that she had 2 weeks, and then she had to leave. Rumor has it that he and Alice rented an apartment in Charlotte. I thought it was good that they deserve each other. Lieutenant Brown called me a week later. I thought you might want to catch up on the latest news and find out when this will all be heard in court. After they got out of prison, we made it clear to them that if they left the state, we would prosecute them. Both her and her partner live in the same apartment. They don't work at the motel or the club because they were repossessed by the city, but they found work at other clubs. I don't know if it's just dancing or if there are extras, but I don't think that this is the case. If they are caught again before trial, it could turn out very badly for them. I highly doubt they will go to jail. If they do, it will most likely be from 3 to 6 months. The motel owner and club manager face more serious charges. I doubt that any of them will be able to get their property back. The district attorney is running this year, so he'll give them his best shot. I think both have a couple of years left. They could have gotten more, but they made a deal and handed over several important criminals. We try to keep it a secret because if they find out about it, they won't last a week in jail. Her arrest and likely conviction will become public knowledge, which should help you retain custody of your child. I am very sorry that your life turned out this way, but I am sure that the girls we saved from such a fate will be grateful to us. We followed them through 4 states and all the way to Mexico. Watch the news. What you see is a direct result of you coming to us. We cannot thank you enough. There were several similar stories over the next few months, but I was too preoccupied with my situation to pay attention. She hired a lawyer and tried to block the divorce, and no one, including her lawyer, could understand why. I used Uncle Pete's services, and he said it was an open and shut case. Her lawyer was pretty good, and we had some serious conversations. Oddly enough, one of them concerned money. She wanted half and full unsupervised visitation if she didn't get custody. We met at her lawyer's office. It was the first time I saw her in 4 months. She looked like a completely different person. Her hair, eyes, clothes, everything was a far cry from what she wore when we were married. I think she was a good businesswoman. Always advertised the product. Pete started. I think we're being more than fair. He wants 70% of the assets, no matter how small, and he's giving up his alimony rights. How can that be unfair? Her lawyer was a smart guy, and I knew she must be paying him a fortune. This is simply unacceptable. She wants 50% and full custody of the child, as well as a fair amount of child support. Pete objected. 50-50, he gets custody of the child and will have supervised visits for the first time. If Mrs. Stoneman proves herself trustworthy, the supervision could be terminated. In addition, she will be required to pay child support. The lawyer began to speak as Pete handed him a bank statement. 50-50 includes this money, an account that was not disclosed during the investigation. On the day our clients separated, there were $14,000 in it, and no judge in the world would object. Whoever we got, he will not pay attention to the fact that this account was accidentally not included in the financial documents. Gail's face turned pale. She didn't know that her secret account had been exposed. Just before the arrest, I again reached into her purse and found her bank book. I took it out and photographed it, capturing the account and routing numbers. I guess her lawyer didn't know either, judging by the look on his face. The lawyer asked to schedule a meeting at a later date. For the first time, I said, "No, take it or leave it, Gail. If you fight, a lot of dirty secrets will come out that you don't think I know about. By the time I'm done, any judge in his right mind will give me a restraining order, not allowing you to see your son. If you love him, sign the papers. If money is more important to you, I will send you photos from his high school graduation. That will be the next time you see him." I walked out, surprising Uncle Jake. He spoke for several minutes before leaving. "You have to tell me when you're going to do things like that. Will she sign?" Her lawyer is working on her. He knows that she has no choice but to sign the contract. "Now tell me her dirty secrets." Laughing, I told him I came up with it on the spot. He grinned. Judging by her reaction, she probably has some secrets that she doesn't want anyone to know about. I think she'll sign. Everyone, especially her old friends, thought I was being touchy. Fuck them. Let them fight for the well-being of their child, and let's see how lenient they will be. I did extend an olive branch to Gail, allowing her to visit Chad for 3 hours under parental supervision. The divorce took place before the criminal trial began, but I made sure that I would be in the courtroom when it began. Gail and Alice told a sad story about how Bill forced them into their actions. Looks like he used the motel for a lot of not-so-legal things. The visitors became embroiled in a scandal, and it turned out that most of them were married, but not to each other. 3 divorces resulted from exposure. Alice's husband divorced her too, using Uncle Jake to gain custody of their little daughter. The trial also revealed that he regularly had sex with both of them as payment for allowing them to use the hotel. I wonder how close a cousin he was to Alice. The judge expressed sympathy that they were lured into this lifestyle, but noted that both were tested clean for illegal substances. He ended up giving them 3 months in county jail. Both cried when they were taken out. I ended up getting $2,000 in cash and $50 a week in child support. Gail was able to see Chad twice a week under the supervision of Children's Services, but after 2 months, she was allowed to visit her parents' home unsupervised. Chad gradually moved away from her, and one day she sent a note to her parents. She took a job with a national chain and will travel the East Coast, performing for 6 weeks at one club before moving on to the next. She said, "This is to ensure customers see fresh faces." Gail gave up visitation rights, but begged me to let her see him when she was around. The next year she traveled west and eventually settled in Las Vegas. At least what she was doing was legal there. Chad still received expensive birthday and Christmas gifts, as well as letters when he was old enough. He adapted quite well to a single-parent family, especially since he had 2 sets of grandparents who were constantly nearby. I married again when he was 12, to a woman about 5 years younger than me. She came with her little 7-year-old daughter, and we sold both houses and bought a bigger one so we could all fit in. Chad was a little standoffish at first, but Melody followed him around like he was a god, and he warmed up to her. About a year later, he surprised Katie, my new wife, by calling her mom, and she tried to hide her tears, but we all saw them. I took some of the money I made and dropped the alienation of affection lawsuits I had filed against Bill and the club manager, and bought a half share of Bobby's business. B&M Construction grew into a medium-sized business, and we had a good reputation. We did a lot of work for the state, through the contractor we were working with the month I was hiding from Gail. When Chad was 24 years old, he came to me with a serious question. "I met this girl, Dad. I think she might be the one, and I want to bring her to meet you and Mom. She wants to take her parents with her, if that's okay. I think he's afraid to meet you alone." I thought it was strange, but we agreed to invite them over to grill steaks. By that time, Melody was already 17, and she was no slouch. There were always several girls and several boys in our house. A year later, she left for college. Without her, the nest will definitely be empty. We made it clear to her that she should shoo away her friends that evening and be on her best behavior. Chad showed up about an hour before the scheduled time with his girlfriend in tow. She was pretty, just over 5 feet tall, with a dimple and long blonde hair, and she was built well. Katie caught my eye and grinned. I think she approved the moment she volunteered to help with the garnish. I laughed and handed Chad the beer. Before dinner, she will know more about her than you will learn in your entire life. Pam is a good girl, Dad. She lost her first mother before I lost mine, and her stepmother is all she's ever known. But this woman is like a mama bear when it comes to her. For months I was afraid to hold her hand in her presence. At that moment, her parents entered. Her father shook my hand and grinned. "You don't remember me, do you?" I had to admit that no. He laughed. "It's okay. I visited you before, about 18 years ago. Chad was 6 and Melody was 2. Even then, I think he liked her. I'm Jeff, former Alice." I shook his hand. "Then that means—" "Yes, Melody is Alice's daughter. Let me assure you that she is nothing like her mother. Not at all. She is a good girl, and I will not threaten you if anything goes wrong. Let Amber handle it." Amber was an Amazon, 5 feet tall and weighing about 200. I highly doubted she was fat. She smiled to take the anger out of her words, but still let me know she was serious. "I own a dojo and have a black belt in 3 different styles. Amber has 2. She can take care of herself, but just in case she gets hurt, you'd better just shoot yourself." Melody and Katie went outside and laughed. "Mom, you've known him for 3 minutes and make threats? You must be getting soft. I remember a time when you acted like that. Now come inside the house and meet my fiancé's mother." She suddenly stopped, blushed, and covered her mouth with her hand. I had a feeling she shouldn't have said that. Amber and Katie just stood there for a minute before they screamed and grabbed Pam in a hug and a threesome dance before Melody came out and joined them. Chad and Jeff looked at me. "What should we do?" "Retreat. Let's go sit by the grill. I have a cooler of beer and they won't even miss us." We were already finishing our second beer and laying out the steaks when they remembered us. Still grinning, they sat down and let us serve them like the queens they were. They stayed here for 4 hours before they had to leave. The women were in the living room looking at wedding dresses on the computer, while the men retreated again, this time to the kitchen. Jeff looked at me. "When was the last time you saw Alice?" 15 years or more have passed. I should probably text Gail, although I have no idea if she'll want to come." "She'll come. She and Alice are still close, and I'm sure she'll tell her as soon as she finds out." Jeff was right. Alice and Gail came to the wedding and sat in the back, tearing through napkins at an alarming rate. Even though Chad didn't remember his mother, he was polite to her, allowed her to take some photos, and even did a mother-son dance with her. She cried all the time. I danced with Amber while Jeff danced with Katie, and then Chad brought them both out onto the floor. When Katie came out, she whimpered. She grabbed my hand and said, "Later." I was standing and watching the dancing couples when someone grabbed my arm and pulled me. It was Gail. It was somehow surreal to dance with her, but she didn't say anything. She just held me tightly and then let go and ran away when the music stopped. I didn't dance with Alice, although Jeff did. I watched Amber watch them and wondered if Alice realized how close she was to death. The women disappeared into the chambers to help the bride remove her dress, and I took the opportunity to sit in a small alcove, grateful for the silence. I was thinking about how old I was and smiling at the thought of my grandchildren when a hand was placed on my shoulder. It was Gail. I started to get up, but she pressed herself against me. Please stay where you are. I owe you something, and I need to pay it back. You asked me to tell you why all these years, but I never did. I want to tell you now. Can I sit down? I pushed the chair opposite me with my foot, and she smiled. Once seated, she said it was more than she expected. I started to say something, but she put her hands to my lips, a surprisingly intimate gesture. She always did this when I was ranting, wildly about something. I would appreciate it if you would shut up and just listen so I can tell you everything. She sighed. I did it for the money. We were broke and struggling all our lives. And suddenly I had a chance to make real money. Alice talked me into it. She even took me to a club and made me watch her dance. She was very good. You weren't around me much in the early days, but I was a real party girl. I came to my senses in bed with Bill. And with Alice. He had sex with both of us. I screamed and ran out of the room. Alice took me to an empty room, calmed me down and helped me shower. She had syringes and we both used them. I remember her words. It's all clear now. Mac will never know. But you didn't think so. I thought you would look at me and shout, "Traitor!" When you didn't do this, I began to relax. A few days later, he offered us more. I agreed after he promised that he wouldn't have me. I woke up at 4 in the morning in bed with 2 guys I'd never seen. Then the washing machine broke, and Alice said that in one night I could earn enough to buy a new one. I hated the thought of going to the laundromat, so I decided to give it a try. I thought I would be ashamed and terrible, but that's it. What I felt was a surge of strength, especially when they started throwing money on stage. Alice collected it for me, and I had $180. In those days, people worked hard all week and didn't collect $180. Then Alice told me that the real money can be made by mingling with the crowd and persuaded me to work with the crowd. Alice and I agreed to rotate. I'd take Monday, Wednesday, and Friday one week, she'd take Tuesday and Thursday, and we'd alternate the next week. During that time, I wouldn't have sex with anyone but Bill, and he'd get me twice a week. She sighed and took a sip before continuing. I didn't sleep with anyone until my car broke down. I needed $800 really quickly. I had just finished my set when this drunk guy offered me $200 for sex. I hesitated for about a minute before I grabbed his hand and dragged him across the parking lot. After that, everything went like clockwork. Bill called me into his office and said that from now on, Jones would have to pay $15 for the use of the room. I didn't want it to come from my income, so I made them pay. Everything went on as usual. Until we were arrested, we never found out how they knew about us. She stopped, overcoming herself, but grabbed my hand when I tried to get up. I have to tell you that at the time when I had a twisted mind, I convinced myself that I was doing this for us, so that we could have a better life. I even set a goal for myself, $60,000, and I was going to quit, get a small job somewhere, and say I make a lot more money than I actually do, and put that money back into our accounts. When we got caught, that didn't happen. Gail stood up. That's it. I was a victim of greed and stupidity, and it cost me everything. It took me years to come to terms with it, but I'm moving on with my life. Now I'm a successful businessman. She handed me the card. Tell this to Chad. Tell him I thank him for the invitation, but for now, he has enough family. Tell him that if he has children, he should send me pictures. She stopped at the door. Oh, and tell him never to go there. And you too. He can get me by phone or email. If I can give him what he wants, I'll do it. And you too, if anything. That's it. Goodbye, Mac. I highly doubt we'll ever see each other again, so live well, love your wife and daughter, and protect them as best you can. She grinned as she walked through the door. Yes, I named my business after you. Consider it a fee. Then she disappeared. I looked at the card. Max, Upscale Gentlemen's Club. Her number was written on the back. I was still there when Katie found me. Come on, she said, pulling me by the hand. Let's go home and recover. I chuckled as Melody walked up to us. I wouldn't get too complacent. We'll have to do it all again in a few years, and this time will be much harder for you. We'll figure it out. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story. because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.